First of all, I want to thank Dental Intel for inviting Wendy and I to share some of our learnings with you all. And I appreciate what they've done for our industry. They have made data accessible, understandable, and I'm just so grateful for them and all that they've done for analytics in dentistry, because it's such a valuable tool. I don't know what we would do with it on running our own practices or helping our clients. So thank you very much, Jerem, for all that you do. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to get started here. So my topic is how to improve annual patient visit, that number, that metric in Dental Intel. And it's kind of a fun topic because there is just so many ways to do it. And there's just so many ways that that we can influence that number. And everything Wendy talked about can influence that number. And there's things beyond what I'm going to talk about that can influence that number. But I'm going to talk about some of the very simplest things, some of the very fastest things that you can do to influence that number. And that's kind of where I like to play. I like to play on the easy side, right? Focusing on the things that are going to have the most impact with the most amount of ease. So my name is Dr. John Meis. Wendy and I co-founded the Team Training Institute, and we help practices in all different kinds of ways. So a little bit about my story. This is my first office in Ottawa, Iowa. So I graduated in 1986 from dental school, and it was the depth of the farm depression. So this is when the commodity prices collapsed. Farmers couldn't pay back their loans to the banks. The banks failed. The farmers failed. This was kind of the end of the family farm and the beginning of the big corporate farms. And so I was in a town where the only industry was agriculture, and agriculture was in the dumps. And so people were going bankrupt. Nobody really had any money, and nobody, because none of the businesses were doing well. Most of them weren't surviving. So I had a goal though, right? Very goal oriented. I had a goal. 1 crown a week was my goal. And I charged at the time $4.86 for a crown, but I would do them for $2.86 because I knew the people there needed help. And I wanted to help them as much as I possibly could. And so I did a lot of free dentistry that first year, and I thought it would build goodwill with the community that I was new in, and it certainly did. My first year production, $300,000, not too bad in that day and age. First year personal income, $27,000. So I was killing it. No, it was practically killing me. But the farm economy did recover, and the town recovered, and my practice blossomed. I sold that office, just to give you a little background. I sold that office, bought a larger one, grew that through changes of locations and additions and remodels into a 21-op office. And when I left that office, we were doing about $6 million on a gross production basis per year. Began coaching other dentists in about 2004. Wendy and I got together in 2010. And about that same time, I formed a new partnership with a big dental group, and that partnership began to build. I contributed my office to that, and that partnership began to build practices. Eventually, it got to 13 locations in Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. At that time, I joined the executive team of that bigger group, Mortensen Dental Partners. I started as Chief Development Officer, and later was president of the practices side of the group. So I was largely spending a lot of time on development. During that time, we went from 50 to 120 locations. And our model was really the same. We bought good practices, and we tried to use our technology, our background, and our knowledge to improve the performance of each of those. So when I left, the group was doing about $180 million in revenue. So it was a relatively big group. So at that time, I had the 120 practices that I was watching, and we had about 60 high-level clients in TTI. So I had about 180 practices that I was able to watch, right? So now I get 180 years of experience every year, right? If I just watch it, if I'm just careful about what I'm watching and what I'm learning, I got a tremendous amount of experience. It allowed me to see the outliers, and the outliers have such amazing lessons. Jerem was talking about the report that they released earlier this year about what the top 10% is doing. That's looking at outliers, right? You're looking at the very best. You can also learn from the very worst too. So I was able to observe that, and now with Dental Intel and all of their data, we can see it so well. And Dental Intel does a great job of sharing that. And if you haven't downloaded that report, you should, because there's a lot of valuable information in there. So, really over that time, I had 800 years of experience, right? I had a lot of trial and error, which is the slowest, most painful and expensive way to learn. But I learned a lot that way. I put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Lots of Con Ed and consulting to improve my understanding. And I studied the outliers, like I said, had many joint ventures, including ours with Dental Intel. We consider them a partner of ours. And because what we do is so integrated with what they do. So with all those years of experience, now I'm going to bring that experience to you to talk about annual patient value, right? So annual patient value, this is the definition of it. So if you click on Dental Intel on the little I in the corner, it will tell you how those numbers are calculated. So if the number doesn't make sense to you, click on that, see how it's calculated. If it still doesn't make sense to you, see how you enter the information that Dental Intel is picking up. So this is how it looks at it. It's looking at the annual, it's taking the last 12 rolling months, so the previous 12 months collections, and it's dividing it by the number of active patients, which I believe is patients that have been in your office in the last 18 months. So that's the definition. Now the definition is kind of interesting. Here's where we find it. So this is on the collections board, and it's in the upper right-hand corner, annual patient value. So I grew up in Iowa, and in Iowa, we have a term that farmers use called yield, and usually it's yield per acre, and it's the number of bushels of grain that are gotten from an acre, right? And so they're looking at yields. Are yields up or yields down? And in the same way, annual patient value is really a yield calculation on patients. So the yield, you can think of it that way, collections per patient. And what it's really telling you is for each patient, how well you are doing on that dental journey, right? Their dental journey is from where they are to being stable, healthy, and attractive. This number gives you an idea of how well you're doing at moving them along that continuum. So for me, this number really can be thought of as a treatment quality metric, right? The better you are at moving people along that continuum, the higher this number is going to be. So I'm going to say this, it should go without saying, but everything that should go without saying, you have to say. When it comes to patients, the only sustainable, successful thing that we can do is to do the right thing for the patient at the right time, every time. And when we talk about some of the things that we're going to be talking about, dentists are good at right thing, fair at the right time, and we struggle with every time. We struggle with that consistency. And we'll talk about it in a little bit, just how difficult that consistency can be. So how do we improve this, right? That's the real question. How do we improve it? And how do we improve it quickly? Well, I'm going to talk about some ways to do that. First of all, this is a calculation, right? And we take the denominator, and if we lower that number, right, then the ratio is higher. Now, that means you have to collect just as much with fewer patients, right? So there's two ways to reduce active patients. One is to ignore patient retention, right? And I love this one. This I got, this was on a Facebook feed. And the message here is don't pre-appoint all hygiene. Now, in fairness to New Patients, Inc., I did not download the report, and I don't know what their report says. What the ad says is pre-appointing everyone is bad. Okay, So if you, and it says this common system stagnates dental practices. So yeah, it stagnates them with patients that know you, that trust you, that like you, that buy stuff from you. You know, that's the kind of stagnation I like. So in their case, if you don't have retention of patients, then you have to get a lot of new patients, which is the business that New Patients Inc. is in. So when I saw this, I thought, my goodness, that message of the ad, I didn't read the report, that message of the ad is wrong. I mean, it's Homer Simpson wrong, and the data proves it. So when it comes to building annual patient value, retention is key. So the next way we can do it is reduce the number of new patients, right? And I know a lot of you right now are saying, oh my gosh, you can't do that. You don't want to do that. Well, maybe, maybe not. All right. So there's really kind of a new patient conundrum or quandary. And that is, we think that, that new patients, the more new patients you have, the more collections you're going to have, the more production you're going to have, the more collections you're going to have, and the more profitability you're going to have, right? That's kind of the groupthink in dentistry, and ads like NPIs, you know, kind of reinforce that. But the fact is, that's not what happens. There is a point on that new patient where we've got too many and we start to dip. All right. So why it dips is, first of all, if you are overloaded with new patients, right? First of all, new patients are hard, aren't they? They take a lot of time. So, you know, you tell new patients, fill out these forms and come in with the forms filled out, or fill them out online. And do they? Some do, some don't. When they come to the office and you have them fill out stuff, some take 5 minutes, some take 35 minutes. So our schedule is kind of goofy. Now we have to build rapport with that patient. So we're spending extra time on the rapport building side. We have a lot of information to gather. So it loads the front desk with getting all the information, getting them entered into the systems. It takes time for the back to get all the information that we need, build that rapport. The doctor exam times are longer. And so when we have too many, we start to see some things changing in the data. And one of the first things that we start seeing is that diagnosis percentage, that's the percentage of exams that have some diagnosis, starts to go down, right? And how this feels as a dentist is, you're going in, you're doing an exam, you're feeling rushed, you've got the uncertainty of all these new patients, you have a patient in front of you, they need something, yeah, but it's not that bad, and I'm in a rush right now, I'm going to do that next time I see him. I'll talk to him about it next time I see him. It won't get too much worse than that amount of time. So the diagnosis percentage goes down. Dollars per diagnosed exam goes down, right? So when we have this number going down, this is where we start to see it affecting the quality of care. Then case acceptance as a percentage, we got so many coming in, we don't care. And this isn't conscious thought, this is kind of unconscious thought, but we see it all the time. When practices get over a certain amount of new patients, their productivity starts to go down, their collections goes down, their profitability goes down. So all these four start to go down. This is why watching these numbers carefully is important, because it may be an indicator that you are out of capacity. And if you're out of capacity, we're going to see dropping productivity numbers. Dentistry is a business of flow, right? So the more things that you've got coming by you to a point, the better off we're going to do. There's a point at which it can be too much. So when I go fishing, I want to go fishing in a pond where there's a lot of fish that are really hungry, right? That's what it's like for me. So making sure that we keep patient flow up is really critical, except in those instances where we've got too much already. So I'm going to just draw a little model for you. And this is how we help practices. If we're going to have a successful practice, there's some things that we have to have. And first of all, we've got to have patient flow. If we don't have enough patients to diagnose things on, if we don't have enough patients coming by, our productivity, our profitability is going to be stunted, right? Then we need case acceptance. So to get case acceptance, we've got to have good diagnostics. We got to have good skills in able to get case acceptance, because if you have patient flow and no case acceptance, you're just spinning your wheels. You're on the hamster wheel, right? You're just going faster and faster and faster and not getting anything done. And once we have patient flow and case acceptance, we need efficient delivery. And we'll talk about efficient delivery a little bit. We'll talk about all of these. So we have systems to check this out. First of all, we look at capacity and demand, which is the problem, right? Do we have too much demand? Fine, then we're going to focus on retention. We don't have to focus on new patients. We just got to focus on retaining what we have. If we need more new patients, we have a new patient generator, right? So our demand generator is a set of systems and technologies that will provide all the new patients you would ever want to need, right? It just makes it happen and makes it happen automatically. And when we have that, when we have the demand generator in place, now we really need skills in order to manage that patient flow. And some of the skills that we use is predictable treatment planning, right? So that you know what you're going to treatment plan, and you're going to treatment plan it the same way every time. Every time you see that condition, no matter who the person is, you're going to diagnose it the same way. Same thing, same way. And your team needs to understand that, because the team has a huge role in case acceptance. And so our company's called the Team Training Institute, because dentistry is a team sport, right? You can't do it on your own. And the better you and your team are synced up as doctors, the better we're all synced up, the more effective that we're going to be. So we have the team's role in getting patients to the point where the only question they have is finances. And so we have systems in place to be financially friendly so that we can help patients fit the treatment that they need into their budget. And so when it comes to efficient delivery, hygiene explosion system, Wendy talked about it already, it creates a tremendous amount of efficient delivery, increases hygiene product.
We lost sound. Hey, John, we lost your sound.
Can you hear me now, Jerome?
Yep, there we go.
All right, very good.
We were just out probably like that last 20 seconds.
Okay, very good. So in the case acceptance, we need to have the team, all the team and the doctors, we need them to be all synced up together so that we get the highest level of case acceptance in the least amount of doctor time. So we're using doctor's time very, very productively. Next, we want to be financially friendly. And financially friendly means we work hard to fit the treatment that patients need into their budget. We have a very systematic way of doing that so that everybody can get started on their care, so that everybody can start moving on that continuum to having healthy, stable, and attractive teeth. The last circle is efficient delivery. And efficient delivery, Wendy already talked about the hygiene explosion and how that drives up hygiene productivity, how that drives up the quality of care for patients, how that improves the health of patients long-term. I'm going to talk a little bit about same-day dentistry and the impact that that has. And the last little piece that we need is to make sure that we're scheduling everything properly so that we stay on time. And really, to make all of this happen, right, we need to have great leadership. So those are the things that the Team Training Institute does and how they help people. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about capacity and demand. Wendy already talked about hygiene explosion. I'm going to talk about same day, and I'm going to talk about case acceptance, right? So we're going to hit a little bit in each of these circles. Sound good? All right. So
What I want to demonstrate to you is that little hinges swing big doors. If we find the right things to identify that have a high impact and are relatively easy to do, and you focus on those with a lot of energy, it's amazing how quickly things can improve. It's just stunning. And when we look at the dollars and cents of it, which is only a measure, right? It's a measure of how well we're helping patients get better, because we're only doing the right thing for patients at the right time, every time. But what can happen is nothing short of amazing. I'm going to introduce a principle to you called the next dollar phenomena. And I'll explain why this is important. You may catch it as we're going through this. I use a lemonade stand to describe this. And with the lemonade stand, glasses sell for $1. Cup and all the ingredients are 10 cents. Fixed costs are rent, labor, all that kind of stuff are $89 a day. All right, so if we sell 100 glasses a day, how much profit is created per day? Here's the math, and it comes down to $1. Now I'm going to make one change in this calculation, and that one change is instead of selling 100 glasses, we're going to sell 120 glasses. So let's look at the math with that increase. Our profit went from $1 to $19. So 20% more sales got 19 times more profit. Economists call this phenomena marginal profit, and it is that once the fixed costs of an office are covered, everything above that, every additional procedure is very, very profitable. Right, so we're going to look at a same-day procedure, same day meaning something that was done that day that wasn't on the schedule at the beginning of the day. So let's say it's a simple restorative procedure. Let's say it's a composite restoration. We did that. And so what is the additional cost for that additional procedure? Well, all of our overhead with supplies, right? Most offices, that's 6 or 7%. You may have some bonus system with your team that might be 0.5% or something like that. But that procedure is like 95% profit because we didn't have to add any people, we didn't have to add any space, we didn't have to add anything. So these same day procedures, a procedure done today is much more profitable than a procedure scheduled out. All right, so here's how that matters. So we'll go back to Dental Intel's practice profitability formula: visits times production per visit times collections minus overhead equals profits. So this is Dental Intel slide, and I love it because each of these levers can be pulled individually. My experience is that doctors spend a lot of time and effort on the overhead circle. That same time and effort spent with coaching on visits and production per visit would have multiples better impact on profitability. Okay, and we're going to show that. So we're going to in this example, we're going to increase visits just 10%. We're going to increase production per visit, and I'll show you how to do it in a little bit, by 25%. Collections, because we're going to use the financially friendly system, we're going to have less collections problems, so we're going to improve that by 2%. And overhead's going to drop, isn't it? Now remember, we have this growth, but we have the same footprint, we have the same team, we have the same everything. We had these just little bits of growth, and so what's the overhead going to do? Well, it's going to drop because we have all these highly profitable procedures that we're adding, right? So when we look at these numbers and we start to do the math, this is what it looks like. And this is the starting numbers are the typical $1 million practice, right? And so, but look what happens to overhead, right? When we have those next dollar procedures done, overhead drops significantly. But look what happens to profitability. It doubled just with those little changes. And that's why this profitability formula is so powerful, because all we have to do is find the right lever to turn, and the profits grow up dramatically. And it's only by doing the right thing for the patient at the right time, every time. That consistency of doing the right thing is just so important. So this is John Rockefeller, who was the richest man on the planet, and compared to the rich men of today, he was much richer, right? So in comparison to the society, he was richer than Bezos and Buffett and all the very rich guys. And he had a simple principle that there's only 3 ways to grow your business: increase the number of customers, increase the transaction size, or increase the purchasing frequency. Okay, the only 3 ways to do it. Well, I applied that to dentistry, right? And so in dentistry, it's increasing the number of patients that you have, assuming that you have capacity, right? If you're out of capacity, more patients drives down profitability. That's why we start off with our circles with that capacity, demand, and analysis. When you're in your practice, you cannot tell when you're out of capacity. You can't tell. It doesn't feel like it. You're out of capacity way before like you feel that you are. And when you are out of capacity and you fix it, your practice just grows like crazy. It's hard to even keep up with it. So ways to do that is retention. Another way to do that is with new patients. Retention, way less expensive than new patient attraction, way less, right? So retention. Then we want to increase the transaction size. So we're going to talk about how we use same-day dentistry to do that. And we're going to talk about improved case acceptance. Those 2 things will increase transaction size and increased frequency of purchase, retention, right? When we look at our practice and we look at all those people that have been in the last 18 months, and we look at the average time between visits, if we could shorten that, wouldn't it be great if all our patients stuck to a 6-month recall, for instance? Many of them do, many of them don't. We don't measure that very often. And so we don't realize how many of them are going out 7, 8, 9 months before they actually get it done. So a little hint here, you notice that retention is on here twice. And one of the great lessons from Dental Intel's data, because we're able to look at practice management data and compare it with financial data. One of the big things that I knew it was true, but I didn't realize how impactful it was, is their data shows that retention is king, that is a key number to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and start talking about some case studies. And first, I'm going to start out with Dr. Betts. And Dr. Betts was on episode 4 of our Double Your Production podcast. If you haven't picked up your phone and gone to your podcast provider and looked us up, now's a good time to do it, so that you get on that, you can get great information. So Dr. Betts came, we did a roadmap call. A roadmap call is how we identify, looking at data from practice management software, looking from data from Dental Intel, and looking at our proprietary metrics. And we identify where that low-hanging fruit is, where the easy to do but high impact, where is the place that we need to focus? What I've noticed is that practices that focus on 5 things make very little progress. The ones that focus on 1 make a lot of progress, right? So we want to identify, we want to tear it down to 1. And it may be 1 thing for the business office team, 1 thing for the clinical team, 1 thing for the hygiene clinical team, but we break it down into something very, very simple. So we had to understand where Dr. Betts wants to go. So Dr. Betts is, probably within 5 to 10 years at the end of his career. He wants to make his practice the best it can be. He really doesn't want to do associates, doesn't really want to do, additional, he doesn't want to add any ops. He doesn't want to have multiple locations. He just wants to make his thing the best it can be. So when we looked at all of his data, we identified where one of the blockages was. And when we looked at this, the one on the doctor clinical side was case acceptance. Case acceptance was low. All right, so that was the thing that we focused on. We also focused on hygiene because almost always hygiene has a lot of opportunity. I would say 95% of the practices we look at, hygiene is a place to focus on. And Wendy talked about it so beautifully earlier. You all know what I'm talking about. So this is what happened February of 19, let's look at the numbers here. So when we look at average dollars per exam, 376, really kind of low. So with Dr. Betts, he was a very conservative provider. And I want to talk about diagnostic assertiveness. So if we took 10 dentists and had them examine a patient with any kind of complexity, would we end up with one treatment plan? No, we wouldn't. We'd end up with a few different ones, right? One of those would have the most treatment. One of those would have the least amount of treatment. And that difference I call diagnostic assertiveness. So some practitioners are more assertive than others, and that's not a judgment. I'm not saying it's one's right or wrong. I'm not saying one's better than the other either. They're both fine, but it's just knowing where you are. And so when we have this kind of low dollars per exam number, when we look at that number and look at how to improve it, most people are fearful that I'm going to say, oh, you got to do more crowns, or you got to do more of this, or more of this, or this is off, or that's off. What we work on is consistency. That's how we help people that are diagnostically unassertive. We help them improve this number. So when I say consistency, when I describe this to most dentists will agree with what I'm saying. And that is, we don't diagnose consistently. We try to, but we're human, right? So times when we're tired, right? We do sometimes have that thought in our head, I'm just going to take care of that. I'm going to talk to them next time. I'm going to take care of that. We do sometimes say, oh, they need this, but I know they don't have any money because they had a hard time paying their bill last time. And we have this stuff that goes on in our head, consciously or unconsciously. And so if we're sick, if we're running behind, if we have if we have a patient that we know is going to ask 1,000 questions, right? So we don't diagnose the same all the time. And the way to improve this number is to improve that so that you have clear treatment plan protocols. The team all knows what it is. The team is part of a case acceptance team. And when we have that teamwork, we have a higher level of trust. We have a higher level of diagnosis. So the next thing to note on this is only 27% of the time was he diagnosing anything in exams. Again, that's low. And the case acceptance at 50% isn't bad, but one thing to remember is, I think some doctors, when they have a low diagnostic assertiveness, they think they make up for it with good case acceptance. Not usually, not usually. If one's not so good, the other's not so good. And largely it's because we're not using our team in a team process. But look what it looks like 2 years later, right? He's up dramatically on average dollars per exam. He's up on diagnostic percentage. And look at his case acceptance, man, went way up. And dollars accepted went way up. So compare these. So just by fixing his case acceptance process, that's the kind of results that you can have. So making sure we have clear treatment plan protocols, make sure our team understands those and understands their role in getting case acceptance, being financially friendly, those three things together made that big of a difference for Dr. Betts. Next case study I want to talk about is Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook did roadmap call, same thing. We got clarity on where he wanted to go, and we identified the blockage, and the blockage for him was same-day dentistry. So he had the feeling that he was full, and he had plenty of patient flow, but his productivity wasn't as good as it could have been. And that was the big piece that was missing. So 2019 collected 1.3 million, 2020, 2.1. Huge jump, right? Huge jump. Did that huge jump in a year that was the worst year in the history of the dental profession, right? So that is fantastic. His take home increased by more than 400K. which increased the value of his practice by more than $1 million. In 1 year, he added more than $1 million to his net worth. 1 year. That's what happens when we fix these things. So here's his production year over year. We started working with him in mid-February, I believe, of 2019. I'm sorry, 2020. And so you'll see February of 2020, we had a big jump. March matched the previous years, but they were only open half the month, right? April was a bust for him, but look what happened after that. Production went up dramatically. Now, some of you are saying, yeah, production went up dramatically, but you know, his collections probably didn't keep up. Oh, they did. Take a look at this. Don't we all wish that our AR aging looked like this? So they're doing a fantastic job of collecting the money from insurance companies and from patients. So the next thing somebody's going to say is, oh, they got a bunch more new patients, and that's why their productivity went up. No, this is their new patient number. So this is on the new patient graph year over year. And you can see during the time frame that we're talking about, in general, over all the time, is the red dotted line. That's the trend line. And you can see that trend line is completely flat. No more new patients from January of 19 to February of 2021, right? The number of new patients has stayed level over that time period. But over the time period that we're looking at here, you can see new patient numbers actually went down, right? So here's a case where they had too many new patients, and slowing down some of that new patient flow actually allowed them to become more productive and more profitable. It's a great example of the principle that I was talking about. So here's what they did. Instead of focusing on new patients, they had plenty of those. They focused on retention. So this is February of 2019. They had 600 patients unscheduled. Look at that. They got that down to 445, right? So really good improvement. So those new patients are now, or those patients are now continuing care, and that increases the patient flow. But here's where the big power was. Check out these numbers. In May of 2020, 41% of their productivity came from same-day procedures. So this huge jump is really what drove the increase in profitability. So these same-day procedures are both hygiene and doctor, and had a tremendous effect. So February of 2020, here's where he was. February 21, you know, it's a $240 jump on annual patient value. All right, well, now let's do some math here, shall we? So he's got 26, almost 2,700 new patients or active patients. It went up by 240 per. That's where we get just a tremendous jump in productivity and collections. Now remember, with the next dollar phenomena, which much of this money was, the profitability absolutely soared. Next one I want to talk about is Dr. Lambrix. And Dr. Lambrix, we did the roadmap call. We got clarity on where he wanted to go. And so for Dr. Lambrix, he had everything dialed in. His practice was extremely productive, extremely profitable. It was all dialed in, but he was getting bored. And it was so predictable and so everything dialed in, locked in, just doing well. He was getting bored, and he was starting to lose his passion for dentistry. He was starting to lose his motivation, and he knew he needed to do something in order to get going again. So we identified the blockage in his practice was hygiene and same day both. And so here's what happened. We started working with him in 2018, the beginning of 2018, and you can see hygiene productivity went dramatically up. And you can see it's still going up. And office production, you'll often hear consultants say, well, if hygiene production goes up, doctor production goes down and the practice doesn't do any better. Not true. If as hygiene goes, so does restorative. Remember, 70% of restorative treatment comes out of recall hygiene, right? So the better recall hygiene does, the better the practice does. So when we focused on same-day dentistry, one of the metrics that drives up, of course, is production per visit. And so we can see in 2019, 2-doctor practice, both doctors doing 300 and some dollars per visit. 2021, the two doctors that were there in 2019, right? They've both gone up dramatically, right? Maybe 80% up. And they have a new dentist, right? Dr. Kyle. And Dr. Kyle, straight out of school, look at his production per visit. You know, absolutely incredible. And it's because of the systems we helped them put in place so that it was much more predictable. The provider didn't matter as much. It was the systems that drove the results. And remember that systems drive results. If we rely on people and on talent to drive our results, the challenge with that is that people come and go. We want them all to stay, but they come and go. And if you don't have the systems in place, but have a highly talented person that you lose, you can't find a highly talented person to plug in there, your results are going to decrease. So systems create predictability. So I wanted to offer this for everybody. And this is Wendy and my ultimate guidebook, how to double or triple your practice production. And this one hit #1 on Amazon in the dental management category. Very proud of this. And we're going to buy that book for you. So if you pay the postage, we'll buy the book. And you can go to drjohnsbook.com. And that's where you can order it. Or you can go to Amazon and pay 19 bucks and shipping for it. But you go here and we'll buy the book for you. So, Jerem, I'm ready to start dig into some questions because a lot of things that I say kind of shake people up a little bit. So I just thought we'd save extra time for questions.
Let's start with this one. And before I read this, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them down into the chat or also into the Q&A. We're taking note of every question that's being asked. We will provide a document that has all the questions and the answers from the speakers. But to do it live, we'd love to do them all live. So the first is, you mentioned a roadmap call.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the roadmap call. And in fact, dive pretty deep into it.
Okay. So the roadmap call is really an opportunity for us to really get down to what's going on in your practice. So we really focus on three things. One thing is where you want to go, getting clarity about that. So we talk about where people want to go really are in different categories. So we certainly talk about collections, we talk about team, we talk about scalability, we talk about time. And you know, we find out exactly what the ideal picture looks like for a practice. Then we find out where you are now, right? So that helps us identify the gap between here and here. And once we identify that gap, then I want to know, what are the roadblocks that are in the way? What's slowing you down or stopping you from getting to that ideal picture? So once we have those three things in place, now we can create a plan on how to get there, right? So typically there's some things missing. There's some systems missing, there's tools missing, there's skill sets missing. So we identify that very, very clearly so that there is kind of a three-step plan. And again, focus is everything. You know, we don't talk about everything that needs to be done. We talk about, you know, the handful of things that are going to make the biggest amount of difference. So this roadmap call, we used to do these just with our clients. After somebody became a client of ours, we would do the roadmap call as part of the onboarding process. We've changed that just recently, and we're doing these roadmap calls for anybody who asks for them. And so we do a quick 10-minute brainstorm on what the things that we should be talking about on the roadmap call, and then we schedule the roadmap call. So we do these for anybody now. So if somebody wants one of these roadmap calls, you can just call the office, and they will help you get one set up. I'll put the number up here. There we go. So that's what a roadmap call is. And when people get done with the roadmap call, they have their voice. You can hear it in their voice. Their voice changes. They now have some clarity. They know what they need to do next, and they know, what they need in order to do that. And so all of a sudden, when they start out, often when they're describing their ideal situation, they even have kind of a hard time describing it because they don't know what's possible. And so in the call, I help them look and see, really what's possible in their situation. And it just opens their mind to a bigger future than they imagined was possible.
Okay, awesome, perfect. I just posted the number down in the
Okay,
chat
great.
as well, for those that want to take note of that. Here's your next question, coming from Nicole. So we are a very busy practice, but only about 30% of our restorative treatment is coming out of hygiene. Any suggestions?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically when we see that, we know that the teamwork isn't where it needs to be. And so the teamwork really starts out with the doctor or doctors creating that predictable treatment planning so that everybody knows that anybody in the office, the front office, can look at an x-ray and say, doctor's probably going to recommend this. Getting your treatment planning protocols down to that level of specificity, and your team trained how to do that, team trained on what it is, so that they can look at cases and they can come pretty close to what you're going to recommend. That's where it starts. Next thing is that we all use the same language, that we decide on how we're going to describe things so that we don't confuse patients. So Wendy and I use some secret shopper video with some of our clients. And we have a video of a doctor talking to a patient, and they had some fillings that needed to be done. And he was talking about, he used the word caries, he used the word decay, and he used the word cavity. They're all the same thing, right? But using three different terms. The one person used three different terms. You imagine if everybody in the office used three different terms, how confused the patient would be. And confused people don't move forward. They don't have the confidence to move forward with you. They don't have the trust to move forward to you. So getting the languaging all down is super important. Next is making everything visual. So anything that you're talking about, you have a way to make it visual so people can see it. So they're going to see it, they're going to hear it, and they're going to hear it from multiple people during their visit. That's the team's role. And then making sure that we're financially friendly. And of course, offering to do it that day. Offering to do it that day creates a tremendous amount of yes when it comes to case acceptance, because it's hyper convenient for patients. And I know that practices that feel they're very, very busy feel like they can't do same day. But I'll tell you, Dr. Cook's office was extremely busy, and they went from 21 to 44% or something like that. And so there were blocks of times that could be used. They just didn't know how to do it. And so getting that system in place to do same day drives up case acceptance. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question, but those are the steps that you would go through in order to fix this. And that would, just think of what that would do to annual patient value, right? I mean, it would drive it up like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And also, most importantly, drive up the quality of care that you provide for your patients, or really the speed at which they go on that continuum to healthy, stable, and attractive.
So that kind of leads into the next question. I'm going to try and dissect this right and make sure I get it right. So we talk about same day acceptance, and we have teams that could possibly be split on this. Doctors encouraging it, maybe other team members are not encouraging it.
Yeah.
What are maybe a couple pointers that our viewers could take in getting the team on the same page and motivated to embrace same day dentistry?
Yeah. It's a really good question. So going back to the why is always important. When you're going to describe something to your team, if you want your team to get on board with something, first of all, you need to have a culture that patient care is, the most important thing, and we're going to do the best that we can. And if that's the culture that you have, your team is already predisposed to it. If the culture is, well, we're just going to kind of do what we did yesterday, tomorrow, and we're just going to kind of go along, then if that's the culture, it's going to be hard to get them there. So we need a culture of always getting better, right? So when I look at doctors, there's some things that if they're willing to do, the team's willing to go along with them. So first of all, having that culture. Second, explaining why, because that hyper convenience allows patients to say yes more easily than if they have to reschedule it. They've already got their life plan to be there, right? So if they've already got their life plan to be there, then we should do everything we can while they're here, because it's just so hyper convenient.
Mm.
The next thing to do is we can look at the data, right? So we can look at average patient visits per day, right? In hygiene, national average, like under 6. Well, we got 8 hours on average. And so we should have 8 patients, right? We might have some kids in there. We might have some perio in there. So probably should be around 8 or more, right? But the average is 6. And yet I hear we don't have time to do this or that or that, right? So they've got 2 hours of doing nothing, average hygienist in the United States, and they feel like they don't have the time. And the exact same thing happens on the doctor side. It's no different. The exact same thing happens. And so just looking at the data and seeing that there maybe is more opportunity there than we think there is. The next step is the how. How do we do this? What are the systems of same-day dentistry? So if the team understands, if it's part of our culture, the team understands why, they understand how. The next piece of it that I think really puts it over the top is to give them a personal what's in it for me, right? And the personal what's in it for me is some type of activity bonus where if they help out with the same day patient, they get some kind of bonus. So in my own office, we did $5 for the person who identified it and got the patient to say yes, and we did $5 for the person who did the treatment or assisted with the treatment being done. And so the team kept track of this on their own. Their manager looked it over, made sure that all of it was legit before it was paid. And that really put it over the top. So we see practices routinely that are doing 40 and 50% of their production same day. And so it reduces the amount of new patients they need to drive, right? And so this whole industry-wide focus on new patients is really, I think, obviously there's a lot of marketing companies out there that are putting messages out like you saw earlier. And that's what makes us all think that that's the easy way to fix this. But no, it's really much easier than fixing how you're taking care of the patients you already have.